Alright, so different type of video. I've been requested by a couple of my friends personally to talk about this topic, so I figured for them I will discuss honestly one of the best human beings that pretty much existed on this planet. And maybe you're young enough not to know who this guy was, but maybe for some of my older viewers, you might definitely know who this guy is on your screen right now. And yes, this is Fred Rogers. Now, if you don't know who this incredible man was, he was pretty much a huge part of my childhood. This was a time before I had satellite television, of course, and I could only watch PBS. But yes, he was a very, very huge part of my childhood. So was, of course, part of one of my personal friends who suggested I would talk about, of course, Mr. Fred Rogers. And it's a little bit of an emotional topic to discuss because some of us in our lifetimes, and again, maybe my fellow colleagues, have a personal connection to Mr. Rogers, will know how touching this man was. And I will leave you a picture right now on the screen of the Google cover from today. And, well, I'm filming this on Friday night, but of course, Saturday, of course, and you all are seeing it on the 22nd. But yes, this was on Google, and it was just heartwarming to see some familiarity with this doodle that Google did. And it literally made me feel like I was watching a brand new episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in a way. Because the last time we had a new episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was, of course, back in 2001. And for a show that lasted so long, and for a show that was on the air for as long as Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was on, I will admit to you all right now that we'll never see a show like this again. And thankfully, it's been re-released on DVD. I know there is a set on eBay, and I can get you a price as soon as I'm talking to you all about it. But they did re-release it on DVD a long time ago. And it is on DVD, yes, I can confirm that. And I'm glad they re-released the whole series on home video, because Mr. Rogers would want us to watch his show, now that he's been gone for a long time. But what he talked about on his show was a lot of different topics. He would talk about the most random things in life that we took for granted. And sometimes he would even talk about emotional, heartbreaking stuff like, what happened to Robert Kennedy in 1968, or divorce. But I'm going to be honest with everybody. I think it's somewhere here on YouTube. I'm not too sure. But my all-time favorite episode, this is way back, and they actually aired this in the 90s back on PBS, and I remembered watching this, was, if I'm correct, was the episode where he talked about pets. And, he talked about how they were important. And this was a time when Subumafu was popular, another PBS show, and it was quite fitting that he had to talk about it at a time when Subumafu was becoming popular. I remember this. This was probably around the late 90s, early 2000s when he did this episode, but maybe I'm wrong, maybe you can confirm it. But I know it's been around for a while, this episode. So I'm trying to get you the price on eBay right now. I can get it to you at the moment. I can confirm that the Beautiful Day collection is very decently priced. There are some DVDs that are around $20, and there's some other DVDs, I believe. I'm not too sure. Speedy Delivery, Learning is Everywhere. Yeah, The Beautiful Day is the most popular one. That's on eBay. And there was also a movie, if you don't remember, that came out earlier this year called Won't You Be My Neighbor? And I thought the way that they talked about his life was just remarkable and beautiful. And Mr. Rogers' top priority in life was to make sure that he had a platform to talk about what he wanted to talk about with children. Either it was for the good, either it was for the bad. He always had that platform for almost 35 years. That's a very big deal. Very big deal what this guy was able to do. And he also had that platform to talk about funding for PBS. And his goal was to make sure that he can get funding for PBS and, of course, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And John Pastor, a Democrat, didn't want the funding for PBS. He was actually on Richard Nixon's side in the late 60s, early 1970s. That, they didn't want funding. Well, they got the funding. And that's why we had Mr. Rogers on public television for so long. And if it wasn't for Mr. Rogers, and I'm going to say this now, we wouldn't have DVDs or Blu-ray or digital HD streaming services. You can even buy a movie now and stream it online for $15. And that was because of Mr. Rogers. And this was, maybe younger viewers, you don't understand this, but when I was growing up, whenever I couldn't watch Mr. Rogers, my parents would tape it on the VCR, right? They would tape it on the VCR and I would watch it. PBS was commercial free, no big deal. I would play it back on the tape and watch it when my parents put the tape in the VCR. But that almost didn't happen. That almost didn't happen because some other PBS stations didn't air his program until late at night. So children couldn't watch the show. But thankfully, Mr. Rogers won his battle in the Supreme Court. And pretty much, he said, and I quote, "Maybe I'm going on too long, but I just feel that anything that allows a person to be more active in the control of their lives in a healthy way is important." And because of Mr. Rogers, the way we consume entertainment now, either it's my channel, either it's other channels here on YouTube that you love and enjoy, that was possible thanks to Mr. Rogers. Because you can watch YouTube, and again, that's why I always try to introduce the thing with, hi everybody watching in their computer, smartphone, tablet, or TV. You have that privilege thanks to Fred Rogers. You have that privilege. So, and I'm going to say this again. Even if you don't know Fred Rogers, you don't know the man behind Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he did a lot good for society. The way we consume entertainment today is because of him. Home entertainment wouldn't be the way it is without Fred Rogers in a way. And without him, we wouldn't look at life differently. And he also did some great things in his show too. He introduced a African American man to our homes. He talked about being inclusive with each other. He was the one that told everybody, I like the way just the way you are, or whatever it was quoted as. But he also introduced a disabled child onto his program too. That never happened before in the history of television. What Mr. Rogers also did was able to make history on television, alright? He was part of the TV revolution. And he was a huge influence in our lives, and I'm going to say this again, currently today, for what we take for granted here with home entertainment, here with YouTube. If it wasn't for him, things would be way different today. The way we consume media, we don't know how it would be different. I don't even know if there would be video streaming if it wasn't for him. So, if you really want to know more about Fred Rogers, just watch Won't You Be My Neighbor. Invest time in seeing it. Because it shows you how he did a lot for us. Not just with home media, but in general how he influenced us positively. And hopefully when Tom Hanks releases his own movie about it, because he is playing Mr. Rogers himself, it'll hopefully be a good movie. That's what I'm hoping for. But to Fred Rogers, I say this: you always will have a legacy, and people to this day still talk about you. And we always have to remember Fred Rogers for what a kind, humble man he was, and the way that he always spoke was very excellent, or excellently crafted, if you want to say that. And I don't know if we'll ever see another person like Fred ever again, because Fred was a laid-back guy. He never got angry. And one other thing about him was whenever he tried to get angry, he actually used his other persona. He actually used his characters from his show whenever he had a personal problem. And that's how he took care of it, I guess. But that's just going to wrap up this video. Thank you all for watching. And once again, even if you don't see the documentary, just look up Fred Rogers if you don't know who he is, because he was an amazing person, and more people need to be educated about him. And I wish future generations will learn more about him, because he was one of the most positive human beings we ever had on planet Earth. So, thank you for watching. Till the next one, please take care.